right. How's everybody doing? Oh, that was lame. Are you guys so glad to be back in school after missing a whole week? No. How many of you who are homeschooled still had to do school last week? All right. So, what's the series that we started last week about? Friendship. Very good. You guys did a lot better than the middle school kids did because they could not figure it out. So, based on the game that we tried to play and didn't go very well, based on those words that you guys were trying to get the person on stage to guess, what do you think specifically in terms of friendship? What do you think we're talking about? Well, those were the words, yes. What? Okay, yeah, so that's good. Not necessarily repairing friendships, but it's close enough. So all of those words dealt with fixing things. So whether it's mending something, whether it's healing yourself, all of those words dealt with connecting, mending, fixing things. And last year, we talked about how it's a new school year, whether you're homeschool, whether you're in public school, private school, no matter what, this year's probably not going to always be easy. Things aren't going to go just super good all the time. You and your friends are probably going to walk through some fires together. Y'all are going to face some difficult times. Maybe you get in a bad fight. Maybe you have the big disappointment. Maybe you experience some sort of loss, whether it's a family member or a friend. You're going to face difficult times. But last week we talked about how you don't have to face those things alone because God has given us each other. God has given us each other. And so last week we talked about how in fire, friendships are forged. So when we go through those fires together, our friendships get stronger, ourselves get stronger. And there's another thing that happens when we go through fire today, and like Trey was close to, they can be healed. Healing can happen through friendships in the midst of fire. And so most of you who have been in JSM for a while, you've heard this story, so I apologize, but it's the only one that I had that applied tonight. So when I first graduated college, go back to me being a junior in high school, the only thing I've ever wanted to do was student ministry. The only thing I've ever wanted to do is be a pastor. And so when I went to college, I went all in. I got a ministry degree, went into lots and lots of debt so that I could be a pastor. And that degree is useless anywhere but ministry. And so I did that, graduated college, went into the ministry. And as soon as I got into the ministry, 13 months in, I'd been through 2 churches, and I was done. I didn't want to be in ministry anymore. I was angry because I felt like God had called me to this. And if that was the case, if God had called me to this, why did I feel like such a failure? Like, why did I feel like I couldn't do it? And so I didn't leave the church, like I continued attending church, but my relationship with God was definitely affected. And during this time in my life, I had another friend who was a youth pastor at a local church. His name was Scott. And Scott and I met pretty regularly. We would meet about once a week for lunch. And during this time when I was kind of just dealing with whatever I was dealing with, not being in the ministry, Scott was constantly telling me, like, dude, you're supposed to be in the ministry. And through that time, he helped me to realize that God was not the cause of my failure. God was not the cause of my failure because the thing about it was when I started ministry, I wanted to be great. Like, I wanted to be the best youth pastor ever, and the key word there is I. The key word there is I, because when I went into ministry, I was trying to do everything on my own. And I was leaving God out of it. Like, I didn't take God into consideration with any of my ministry stuff. And Scott helped me to realize that if I was going to be successful, if I was going to exceed in the ministry, and the same can be said for you guys no matter what you do, if you want to be successful in life, then you need to allow God to lead your life. And that's where I failed in my ministry. I wasn't allowing God to lead my ministry. Instead, I was leading it and letting God just come along and if he wanted to. But what I learned very, very quickly through conversations with Scott was that I was never going to be successful living that way. And what he helped me to realize is that if that was the case with my ministry, then what was my life like? How was I allowing God to lead in my life? And so not only did Scott help me kind of pursue ministry again, but he even helped to heal my relationship with God during a time when I was very angry. And so like we talked about before, just like duct tape and bandages fix things, true friendships can as well. True friendships can fix things as well. And tonight we're going to look at a story from the Bible where we actually see this happen. You guys familiar with the book of Ruth? So have you ever heard the name Boaz? All right, we're not going to talk about Boaz. But anyway, we're going to talk about Ruth. So Ruth starts with this lady and her husband. His name is Elimelech. Her name is Naomi. They live in this place called Judah. And they have 2 sons. And I'm not going to bore you with their names because they're not there very long. So while they're in Judah, a famine comes. And so they have no food. They've got to go find food. So they decide they're going to move to Moab. But there's one issue with them moving to Moab, and that is that Moab is a place where they believe in many, many gods. And Elimelech and Naomi are Israelites, which means they believe and worship the one God that we worship. And so the same God that we worship, they worship him. And so they're going into a place, they're going into a foreign country with foreign beliefs, a foreign language, but they have to do it because there's a famine and they need their family. And so they need to move for their family. And so they decide to do it. And while they're there, Elimelech dies. We're not told how. We're just told that he dies. And so later, their sons, Naomi's sons, marry 2 Moabite women. And then we're told several years later, after they get married, the sons die. So here is Naomi. She's lost her 2 sons. She's lost her husband. She has 2 daughters-in-law who have also lost their husbands. And so we find these 3 women, they're in mourning. The 2 women they married, one's name is Orpah. Weird name, like Oprah, but Orpah. And Ruth. So Orpah and Ruth. And shortly after all their husbands die, Naomi is she's in a really bad spot because Ruth and Orpah, they're in their homeland. So they have family. Naomi has no one at this point. Naomi is in a foreign land where they speak a foreign language. And so she decides that she's going to return home to Judah. She decides that she's going to return home to Judah. And then Orpah and Ruth actually decide to go with her. And so that's where our story is going to pick up in Ruth chapter 1, verse 8. This is what it says. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." And so the reality was during this time, there wasn't much chance for a widow. When a woman would lose her husband, she had to depend on other people to support her. And so that's what Naomi is realizing here, is that she's in this foreign land. She has no family. She has no one to rely on. So she needs to move back home. However, Orpah and Ruth, they're both still young. She talks about them maybe remarrying possibly. And so she's trying to get them to stay because she wants what's best for them, and she doesn't think them clinging to her is going to help them in the long run. And so we find that she's trying to get them to stay in Moab while she goes back to Judah, but they both decide they're going to stay with her. So we'll continue in verse 11. But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, and Ruth clung to her. So we find here that finally Naomi's like, look, she gets real with him. She's like, there is no chance for you guys to stay with me. Like, if you guys stay with me, you don't have a chance. She's saying to them, like, even if I were to be pregnant with 2 sons right now, are you going to wait until they're old enough to marry you? Like, that's super weird. Super weird to think about her having sons so that they can marry them. But anyway, so she's basically saying, like, you guys need to go find a husband elsewhere. And so she's trying to push them away. She's doing her best to push them away. And we find that this works on Orpah. Orpah decided, she's like, all right, I'm out of here. Like, there's no chance, I'm going. But Ruth decides to stick with her. And I want you guys to put yourself in Naomi's shoes. Like, you've literally just lost your entire family. So you're angry, you're grieving, you're hopeless, and you only have 2 people left in the world, these daughters-in-law. You've got Orpah and you've got Ruth, and you've succeeded in pushing one of them away, but there's one, Ruth, who has decided to stick with you no matter how hard you try to push them away. Now, if you guys are wondering who your true friends are, here is a hint from Naomi. Take note of the people in your life who, no matter how hard you push them away, they stick by you. Take note of those people who, no matter how hard you push, they stick by you. No matter the difficulty, no matter how hard, how mean, how rude, how hard you push them away, they stick by your side. And that's what Ruth is here for Naomi. And so we're going to finish up chapter 1. Starting in verse 15, it says, and she said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? And she, being Naomi, said to them, do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the countryside of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. And so finally Naomi, she gives up, and she's like, all right, Ruth's going to come with me. And I think we can all agree that we would be pretty angry and hopeless after going through what Naomi just went through. I think we would all be pretty upset. We'd be pretty angry. And what we find here is that in Hebrew, Naomi's name actually means pleasantness. But here we find Naomi sees nothing pleasant about her life. There is nothing in her life to see as pleasant. So she asks the women in the town, in her hometown, to call her Mara, which means bitterness. So there's nothing pleasant about her life. It is all bitter. So she just says, call me bitterness. She was broken and she was grieving, but she still had one thing. And that one thing that she still had was Ruth by her side. And Ruth, she wouldn't give up on her. She left, I want you to think about it, she left her home. She left her home where she probably had family who could take care of her. She left and went to a foreign country with a foreign language and foreign beliefs. But she vowed to stick with Naomi for life. There's one thing that stuck out to me as I'm reading, as Ruth is talking to Naomi. She says, may the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. So what she's saying here is she's saying, if I leave you any other way than by dying, then I hope that God does even worse to me. I don't know what worse than death is, but I don't want to know. But that's what Ruth is saying. That's the commitment that Ruth is making to Naomi, that I am going to be by your side until the day I die. And from that, can any of you take a wild guess at what Ruth's name means? Throw it at me. No, that's not one. That might be it, but I'm not looking for that. In Hebrew, what does Ruth mean? That is close. It starts with an F. Friend. Ruth literally means friend in Hebrew. So Naomi was bitter. She was faithful. She was a friend, or Naomi was bitter, but Ruth was her friend. Ruth was that faithful friend that she had by her side. She would not give up on her. And finding healing in the midst of our bitterness is not easy. But Naomi had something that I pray that each and every one of you can find in your life, and that is a friend who will promise to walk by your side no matter the pain, no matter the difficulty that you face, because this kind of friendship can be the key to our healing when we are in the midst of a fire. Last week we talked about how exposing steel, remember I had the hammer, we talked about how exposing steel to fire makes it stronger. So you get the steel hot, the hotter it gets, the stronger it gets, it hardens, makes it stronger. We talked about how in the same way the fires that we face often strengthen us, and they also strengthen our friendships if we let them. But fire can do other things to steel as well, just like it can do other things to friendships, because another thing that fire can do to steel is it can put broken things back together. Fire can connect what was disconnected, and that's going to be shown to you through this video we're about to watch. So how many of you have seen Lord of the Rings? So I love those movies. That's actually, after I found that video, I watched the whole movie, not all three, but that movie yesterday. But so there's a sword in Lord of the Rings. It's called Narsil. And this sword is very important to their history. As you saw in the video, they actually, when Lord Sauron was attacking, the sword was broken, and you saw the guy pick it up, and he actually, with the broken piece of the sword, he cuts off Lord Sauron's finger, which then drops the ring that basically the whole movie is about. But the one ring to rule them all. So what we find is that the only way for them to fix that sword, is by reforging it through fire. But the reforging of Narsil was not simply fixing a sword, because once Narsil was mended, it became Anduril, which Anduril was the sword of Aragorn. And Aragorn was the guy who went on to reunite the kingdoms of Middle-earth and became the king of the region. And get that. Like, this sword was mended through fire. So the sword, like we said, the steel was put together with fire. But that's not where the mending ended. Because Aragorn, he was a descendant of the king. But he refused to follow that. But it was through the mending of Narsil that then led him to lead the people to defeat Lord Sauron and reclaim the kingdom. Like, there's so much more that happens through the mending of that sword than just a sword being fixed. And just like Elrond, that elf guy, just like he used fire to reforge Narsil, the Bible tells us that Ruth and Naomi's shared difficulty did something amazing in their lives. In the midst of their pain, Ruth and Naomi were brought together and then healed through their shared friendship. Because we see that Naomi and Ruth, they went through fire together, because Naomi wasn't the only one that lost someone. Ruth lost her husband as well. And that friendship, that bond that they shared, it helped to heal them. And you're probably wondering with how we left the story with Naomi, like changing her name to bitterness, like what healing happened? Well, I'm not fun to listen to read, so you don't want me to sit here and read the entire book of Ruth to you, so I'll kind of sum it up. But basically, what you'll find if you read through the rest of that story is Ruth then goes on to find a husband. And that husband then is that support that Ruth and Naomi need as widows. No, it didn't. It didn't fix Naomi's pain from losing her husband. It didn't fix the pain of her losing 2 sons. It probably didn't even fix the pain of Ruth losing her first husband. But what it did for Naomi is if you go back and you read when she was talking about changing her name, she talks about how God has turned against her. And what we find is through her friendship with Ruth and through Ruth finding a husband is that in a time when she thought that all of her suffering was due to God turning against her, she saw that God was continuing to provide for her. And that's where her healing came in. And sooner or later, life is going to make you walk through fire. We talked about that last week. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You can probably ask every person, every adult in this room, and they can probably share stories about when they have walked through fire. And my hope for you is that you will find someone like Ruth. Or maybe even you will be someone like Ruth for someone else. But that you will find someone who, no matter how hard you push them away, no matter how hard times get, you will find that person who will walk side by side with you through those difficult times. Because no one wants to go through fire. Nobody wants to face difficult times. But in the fire, true friendships are forged. You guys aren't going to know who your true friends are until you face those difficult times. You're going to find the ones that stick around, they're your real friends. The ones that the ones who don't want anything to do with you when you're mopey, the ones who don't want anything to do with you when you're sad, get rid of them. Because they're only in it for the fun times. They're not going to be there for you when life gets hard. You don't need those friends in your life. You don't need those people in your life, because there's another thing that God promises us, like we talked about last week, and that's when life gets difficult, He doesn't leave us alone. He is with us. He promises that He will always be with us, but He also gives us one another. God created us to be in relationship. He created us to be in community with one another in good times and the bad. And guys, there's another thing that I feel like I'm leaving out, and I didn't prepare for this. But guys, if you don't know who Jesus Christ is, then you need to. If you haven't entered into that relationship with Him, that is the most important relationship you will ever start in your entire life. There is no friend, there is no family member, there is nothing on this earth that is more important than a relationship with Jesus. You can have as many friends as you want. You can have the best friends in the world. They are not going to save you from your sin. Only Jesus can save and heal you from that. And He, just like your friends, He will help you through those difficult times as well. So as we close tonight, I want to encourage you guys to just think about a few things. One, I want you to think about when life gets difficult, who are those friends that you can turn to? Who are those friends that you know without a doubt they're going to stick by your side? And if you don't have any of those in your life, then you need to be asking yourself why. Why don't you have those people in your life? Another thing I want you to think about is do you have any friends who need a Ruth in their life right now? Maybe you have some friends who are going through difficult times right now. Maybe you can be that person for them. Maybe you can be that person who helps them walk through that difficult time. And as we go out of this place, as you guys continue through the school year, I want to encourage you guys to begin building those sort of friendships now. I told you guys last week, my very best friends in the world right now to this day are my friends that I made in youth group, the friends that I made at church, because they were the ones that really cared about me. You know how many people I talked to that I went to high school with but didn't go to church with? 0. The people that are in this room right now, or maybe they're at another church, whatever, the people that are around you right now, they're the ones that are going to care the most about you. So I want to encourage you guys to start building those sort of friendships now. Don't wait until you're in those tough times to start building those relationships. You need to build those friendships that heal you and help you to heal others through fire. Let's pray. God, I just thank you for all that you do for us. God, I thank you for just that promise, God, that we weren't meant to do life alone. God, that you are with us every step of the way, God, but also you intended for us to be in relationship and to be in friendship with one another. God, I pray that if there are people in this room right now that don't know you, God, I pray that you would not let them leave this place, God, without feeling something in their heart, God. Help them to recognize that they need you. God, they need to be in that relationship with you. And God, I pray for those in here that maybe they need that friend right now, God. Maybe they're facing a difficult time right now, God. I pray that you would bring someone alongside them. You would help them to find that person who's going to be a true friend to them, God, and that you would help them to heal, God, what they're going through. And I pray that if any of us in this room know someone who's going through a difficult time right now, give us the courage and the boldness to be that person for them, God. Equip us to walk through that fire with them, God. And God, I just pray that as we leave this place, God, that we would begin to focus more and more on you each and every day. God, we thank you. We love you for everything that you do. In your name I pray. Amen.